We've got a major update coming in from India. An intrusion attempt by Chinese soldiers led to clashes between troops of both India and China. Indian Army foiled the attempt, which happened 3 days back. Indian and Chinese troops clashed at Nakula in Sikkim last week after Chinese People's Liberation Army soldiers tried to intrude into Indian territory. Injuries have been reported on both sides. Indian Army has given out their statement now. It reads, "We have received several queries regarding a face-off between Indian Army and PLA troops in Sikkim sector. It is clarified that there was a minor face-off at Nakula area of Sikkim on the 20th of January 2021 and the same was resolved by local commanders as per established protocols." The latest clash at Nakula comes even as Indian and Chinese troops are already engaged in a border standoff in eastern Ladakh. The clash comes amidst the 9th round of military talks between India and China, which lasted for nearly 16 hours. The 9th round of India-China talks got over at 2:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. The two sides have already held 9 rounds of talks on various levels, but the negotiations remain inconclusive. Border tensions started simmering between the two neighbors in May 2020. Both sides have deployed thousands of troops along the line of actual control since then, especially along 3 friction points in eastern Ladakh region. Now remember, last year there was a brawl between Indian and Chinese soldiers in Galwan area where 20 Indian soldiers had lost their lives. PLA did not confirm the number of casualties on its side, but American intelligence sources placed the number at 35 plus. Now this is the latest brawl that has taken place between soldiers of India and China. The latest brawl has happened in Sikkim, this even as 9 rounds of talks have been held. Joining us on this broadcast is Brahma Chilani, who's a professor of strategic studies at Center for Policy Research, and he's joining us live from Delhi. Now, Mr. Chilani, thank you so much for joining us on WION. Now, the Indian Army has released a statement saying that this was a minor face-off in Sikkim between troops of India and China, and sources tell WION this was another fresh incursion attempt by troops of the People's Liberation Army to intrude into Indian territory. Now, according to sources, Indian Army managed to push Chinese soldiers back, which resulted in a brawl. Now, Indian Army has called this a minor brawl, but how seriously will be India's defense establishment treating this fresh incursion attempt by China? Meanwhile, questions continue to remain over the progress made over these 9 rounds of talks, isn't it?
Well, 2 things we have to bear in mind. First, that more than 1 lakh war-ready Indian and Chinese troops remain locked in the Himalayan military standoff. And that standoff actually stretches beyond Ladakh. It's actually all across the Himalayan frontier. So when war-ready troops are locked in military standoff, the possibility of clashes will always be there. Second, we have to look at the latest clash in the context of China's attempts to incrementally expand its aggression and its encroachments. Wherever it finds an opening, it seeks to expand its footprint in order to control more area. Now, if you look at the Sikkim-Tibet border, ironically, that was the only segment of the vast Indo-Tibetan frontier that China did not dispute. But in recent years, it has started disputing even the Sikkim-Tibet border. And since last year, it has turned the Sikkim-Tibet border into a hot border. And this Sikkim-Tibet border clash is not the first clash that we have seen. There were clashes even last year. For example, in May of 2020, when India discovered to its shock that Chinese forces had occupied hundreds of square kilometers of borderlands in Ladakh. So the focus on Ladakh tended to obscure what was happening on the Sikkim-Tibet frontier. But the fact that China has turned the Sikkim-Tibet frontier into a hot frontier is the trigger for the latest clash.
Right. Meanwhile, India's defense establishment, right from the defense minister to the army chief, have maintained that the Indian troops are ready to push back any aggressive posture or behavior by the Chinese People's Liberation Army. But China, like you mentioned, has an expansionist attitude recently, isn't it, under Xi Jinping's leadership? The border between India and China, like you mentioned, has been converted into a hot border. There are many reports of Chinese attempts to intrude into Indian territory. But it's not just the India-China border. Recently, Chinese warplanes intruded into Taiwanese air defense identification zone. United States has sent its own carrier group into the South China Sea area. So, is this an attempt by China to test global resolve when the leadership in America has changed from Donald Trump administration to Biden administration, and we know that Trump administration was very hard towards China? Is China also testing the resolve of the global partnership against Chinese expansionism?
You're right on that. Certainly the incursions that have happened over 2 days into Taiwanese airspace were designed to test the resolve of the Biden administration. But what's happened on the Himalayan frontier is no comparison to what China is seeking to do against Taiwan. In the Himalayan borderlands with India, China has seized key mountaintops and other strategic vantage points. India has lost ground, and the PLA has established forward bases in several areas that traditionally were under India's exclusive jurisdiction. So what we have seen is a redrawing of frontiers by the PLA employing military force. I don't think China has done that with any other neighbor. So what's happening on the Indo-Tibetan frontier, whether it's in Ladakh or the latest attempt to encroach on Sikkimese territory, this underscores the major challenge that India faces vis-a-vis China.
Absolutely, Mr. Brahmacharlani, thank you so much for joining us. There has been aggressive Chinese posture not only in Ladakh, like you mentioned, but in Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. Meanwhile, India says its troops remain ready to push by any incursion attempt. And according to latest reports, last year, India also seized control of several heights on the south bank of Pangong Tso. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.